You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona, and with me always is my good friend
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And we are missing AK Mike today. He is actually back in Alaska.
Yeah, he got recalled.
So we'd like to excuse him.
Yeah,
he did. Yeah, he went up there. I think his daughter is getting married, so we'd like to congratulate him officially on our podcast because I know he's a listener. But yeah, congratulations, and he's up there at the wedding, so we're going to excuse him for this week's episode. However, we do have a great episode. We're going to talk a little bit about the Infinity Wing that we picked up at the last get together there at the Arizona Electric Festival. Yeah. So before we get started, a shout out to Eric Haddad over at 3D Aeroventures, because that's where we picked these Infinity Wings up. And these are the mini Infinity Wings. So both Jay and I were lucky enough to receive one, and he gave it to us almost ready to fly. We needed a battery and,
and a prop.
Receiver.
No, he actually gave us the prop too.
Or actually?
Yeah, just a battery.
He did. He gave us a prop and everything. So if you are a YouTube listener or one of our YouTube followers, you can actually see the Infinity Wing. I have it right behind me. It's sitting right here. And I got the green one, and I think you got a different color.
I got the yellow one.
What'd you get? What color did you get?
Yellow. Stand by.
The yellow one. So, yeah, Jay didn't have his ready. I actually have mine in the background, and so I did get to maiden it. There we go. Jay's got his yellow Infinity Wing, and actually, I believe now correct me if I'm wrong, because we did receive these way back in February, and we're trying to get used to them, but the color is actually part. Is it PLA? Is that what they call it?
Yeah, it's a PLA.
The plastic that.
Right, that it's made out of is called PLA, and but it's a special PLA in the fact that it actually is lightweight PLA. Mm-hmm. So the more heat that you apply to it, it foams, and by it foaming makes it lighter, and therefore if you were to build one out of straight PLA, think of it like a hard plastic, where this plastic kind of gives, because if you think of it more of a foamier, airier type of, material, so it's not as rigid as a straight PLA plastic.
Gotcha. Well, the amazing thing about this mini Infinity Wing, and if you want to look at the plans, I think you can find them on 3daeroventures.com. He has them listed up there, so go ahead and go to his website and check it out. But it's built totally. I mean, the whole thing is 3D printed, which includes the little wheel. Not
totally, dude.
That's on.
I'd say 1% is something else. Thumbtacks.
Okay, you are correct. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that in the podcast there. But I think the motor is not 3D printed. The prop is not 3D printed. Well, although he could 3D print the prop, I'm pretty sure. Eric is pretty resourceful, so I'm sure if he could figure it out, he could do it. What's what I'm saying? He could do the propeller, but we never know. So anyway, so everything with the exception of the servos and the electronics, and which includes the motor. Most of it is 3D printed, and it is pretty amazing. He assembled it for us, and then at the Electric Festival, he presented it to us at the end of the event. We did get to test fly I think it was his original.
It was his own.
It was,
he brought his own.
It was the prototype. Yeah. So he brought his own, and he flew it for us, and then he basically we talked about flying it, and then he let both of us take a turn and fly a battery through the one that he had. Now, I will tell you that we really appreciate him because he gave these to us at the end of the event. But let me tell you how nervous I have been since I've received it. It's one of those things that's so cool, I don't really want to screw it up, right? And I flew his, so I know how it flies, but that one wasn't mine. So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, it's been sitting on my shelf, and it's funny because Eric asked, I got a text from him at one point, and he's like, "Hey, did you get to fly it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just been busy, I haven't." But in reality, I was a little nervous about, taking this beautiful airplane that he 3D printed and put together for us and just taking it out there and just having something catastrophic go wrong, which I should have known, right, from the very beginning that nothing catastrophic would go wrong. He set the whole thing up. It's not like I had to put it together or glue it or put the servos in. All of that stuff was done for me. And because he's already flown his, he knew exactly the length of the pushrod arms. He knew, where the CG was. He knew all that stuff. He just needed me to drop a battery in it and bind it, and there I go, right? So ultimately, it uses a lemon receiver, so it's really tiny, and it uses a 1,000 milliamp battery. Now, I'm going to tell you that I could not remember all I could remember was the 1,000 milliamp. And in my head, I was like, oh, that'll work out perfect because I have these Tattoo 1050s that if you're looking at our video, you can see it. Okay, so it's a Tattoo. It's a 1050. I use this for my Hotliner glider, right? And I thought, well, this will work perfect for the Infinity Wing. So when Mike was down here, he wanted to go fly it, and we took it out to the Sun Valley Flyers, and we were gonna fly it. But that particular day, I think if you remember from our last podcast, was really windy. We wound up crashing the L-39, which is sitting behind me with the landing gear sitting on the table. I haven't fixed it yet. But we did have a little mishap, and I just was not feeling it. And I was like, you know what? It's so windy today, I'm not really going to take a chance. We can fly it at the park on Tuesday because Mike was like, staying here through the park where we go fly on Tuesdays. And he said, yeah, I want to go see the guys. And so I said, well, we'll take the Infinity Wing and we'll fly it there. We'll maiden it there. So we did. We showed up on Tuesday. We got up and went out there, and it'd be interesting. Unfortunately, he's out, but it'd be kind of fun to hear his side of this, right? And so he was all excited. Went out and met the guys again. Hey, how's it going? And they were like all of a sudden really intrigued because I think one or two of those guys actually have a 3D printer, and they're like, "Hey, what is this?" And so they wanted a picture of me and Mike with this new Infinity Wing. So I told them, all the details. It's an Infinity Wing. They looked at it and everything, and they're like, well, go fly it. And I'm like, well, just settle down, We just got here. Let's go fly something before I just, fire
That's
this
right. The
up
first
and
thing
go.
you pick up is an unknown airplane.
So we wound up
flying
flying
fly.
All right, exactly. And so they were kind of laughing, and I said, well, we're going to fly the Funracer because Mike and I had worked on the Funracer the night before, trying to figure out what was wrong with it, and we found out that the ESC, which side note, thank you very much for the phone call that corrected, that yelled at Jay for calling it something different. We're eventually getting there, but yeah, we had one of our New York listeners give us a call and kind of rail on Jay for using that horrible term that we all know and hate.
I tell you, man, it feels I'm just my
is,
lower nether regions are
electronics.
hurting because of all the phone calls we're getting. Man, jeez, woof.
It was pretty funny though. We stuck him out there, and we appreciate everybody giving us a call or an email. They really kind of put the screws to Jay, so hopefully he'll straighten up. But anyway, the ESC in the Funracer was having some issues. We reset the timing on it. I think we had talked about that. And then we found out that one of the connectors was coming loose. So as I powered up, it would stretch the motor, kind of pull the motor, and it would just pop that thing just enough to where it would cut out. And then when the motor quit, it would go back in. So it was really loose and kind of giving me some problems. So I took the little thing off and straightened it all out and stuck it back in there where it would stay. So we went and flew the Funracer, and the Funracer flew fabulous. It was really fantastic. We went out there. I did just some high-speed passes and some tumbles, and we got everything just cranking around. And the speed was, phenomenal because I flew it on a 4-cell. And so once I got done with that, everybody's like, "Oh, that was really cool. Now fly this one," And I'm like, all right, fine. So we got to we got to where we picked this up, and we kind of looked at everything, made sure it was all working. We had already bound it the night before, and here I have these 1050s, and I go to put it in there, and the hatch just barely closes. I mean, it's almost like, and the hatch is held on by magnets, right? And I didn't have Velcro on the bottom of it. So Mike is like, "Hey, are you really going to fly that thing with no Velcro on it?" And I'm standing there like, "Well, I'm not doing aerobatics with it. It's a maiden flight. It's not like I'm going to go crazy with this thing, right? It's just a
famous.
It has no rudder, so I'm just yanking and banking on it. But I'm not going to be doing right." And that's what he said too. He was like, "Oh, you know how this is going to go," and I'm like, "You have a point there." Well, luckily Phil had some Velcro in his box, and so I do have a Velcro on I have the loop side on this one. And so he had some, and so I put it on the tray, and then I stuck this down. And so when I went to go close the hatch was just not quite sitting right where it needed to be, and I couldn't figure out why. And so I thought, well, maybe something's in the way of wire or whatever. And so I kind of moved all the wires around, and it just didn't seem to sit like it did when I remember Eric, when we were kind of reviewing it at the field in February. I remember his hatch sat perfectly, and I couldn't figure out why. So Mike's like, I really think this hatch may fly off in flight, but if you think that it'll stay on, then, so be it. And I'm like, I don't want to have to call Eric and say, yeah, this went horribly. So once again, Phil had some Blenderm in his box, and so I tore off a piece of Blenderm, and I kind of taped it onto the 3D. So I was like, okay, well, at least now if the hatch kind of comes loose, it won't just totally fly off, and then the battery pops out. So I'd solved the two problems that Mike had brought up, and that I was feeling kind of like, okay, yeah, it's probably something that I should do. And so we fired it up and plugged it in, tested everything, gave it a little juice. It worked, the propeller. Now, did you put a folding prop on yours?
Yes,
I
did.
Have a folding prop?
Yep.
Okay, so I did not put a folding prop on mine. Mine has the original prop on it. So it doesn't fold. And so, I wanted to go test it on the grass because I told Mike if something happens and it tips over or whatever, I don't want it dragging itself to, on the hard concrete or the pavement that we have here at Sun Valley Flyers. So we, once again, tested it. It just has elevons, right? So it just has two control surfaces. And I gave it a little juice, and the thing was really, howling. I mean, it wanted to go fly. And yep, there you go. Two control surfaces in the upper part of the infinity portion. And flip that over, and you can see the part where he made the servo wires are permanently in there. They're not adjustable. So he adjusted those control links to be exactly what they needed to be. So they were pretty much, mechanically set at 0, and I gave it just a little bit. I kind of made them. There you go. I kind of made them, level with the back wings, and I thought, okay, this will be the best part that we can, kind of get it level or whatever. And then I had Mike basically hold it up at a 45-degree angle and say, okay, we're ready to launch. So I did one more control test. Okay, left, right, up, down, forward. Everything looked good. All of a sudden in my head, things didn't look right. And I was like, okay, wait, something's wrong. And Mike's like, okay, you want me to throw it now? And I was like, no. let me figure this out, right? And so I could not figure out why, when I went full forward on the stick and to the left or to the right, that one of the elevons would center itself. So I have, if I went right, see, and this is if you're watching YouTube, you can see the look on Jay's face. He's kind of like, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. So that bothered me, right? Because I was kind of like, wait a second, if I go forward, like if I push the nose down, forward stick, then both the elevons go up like they would in an elevator, right? So the elevator goes up, the elevator goes down. So as I pull the stick, I get the nose up, and as I push the stick, I get nose down. So that would be, right, that would be a push over, so they would go down.
Yeah, they should go down.
That worked correctly. Now, if I centered the stick, right, if I centered the stick and I went left and right, then the ailerons, one would go up and one would go down, right? Because that's an aileron. That works. Well, it's been too long for me since I've flown an elevon other than the wing. And I don't really, when we fly the wings, we've flown them so long that I just go up, down, left, right? But in my head, I did a complete 360 with the stick. And so when I was at the center point of the nose down, both of them were up. But when you go to the left, you get the ailerons version of it. So now this one is at full down, and this one centers itself because that's going back like you would on an elevator.
Oh, yeah.
Because the control horn is only... Right? The control horn is only this big. So if you're centered, you get an up and down movement. But if you're full forward or full aft stick, then the motion is to center itself because it's only moving that far. It doesn't go all the way to the other side. But it was really confusing to me at the time. And so I told Mike, I was like, I don't think this is right. I'm going to fly it. And so I was sitting there thinking about it. And then finally I was like, wait a second. That's the way it's supposed to work, right, with an elevon. And then I did the ailerons and I did the elevator again, and then I was like, wait, that's actually normal. That's the way it should work. But it just was weird. It kind of freaked me out, because I'm in this maiden and I'm getting ready to go, and I'm just kind of like, oof. So we got everything plugged back in, and I figured it all out, and I said, okay, that's the way it's supposed to work. And so Mike went ahead and said, hey, do you want me to launch it? I'm like, well, let's walk out a little ways into the middle of the grass area so I can have a bigger. Because I remember when I flew Eric's that it was pretty fast, right? It's a pretty quick little airplane.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying, don't ever get it slow. Don't get slow. Because if it starts to stall, it's unrecoverable. If it starts to spin, then you're done because there's no rudder on it to get it out. And I think he did some pro spin, trying to get it out and wrecked one, or the old original one, or the prototype or whatever. So he just told us, don't get it slow. So Mike launched it at a 45-degree angle, and this little Infinity Wing took off like a homesick angel, man. That thing just jumped into the air and was like a screaming, just, wow, it went out. And, of course, everybody's like, yay, and so I brought it around and got it back to about half throttle, and it was moving. Now, the wind was blowing, not heavy, but it was blowing. And so the downwind runs were pretty exciting. And then, they're all like, oh, do some aerobatics, and I'm like, I don't think so. That, still worried about that hatch. And so I got coming downhill, and I was pretty quick, and I thought, okay, so I did exactly. I did do an aileron roll, and it rolls fantastic. It's very amazing. It rolls almost like the wing, right? Because it just kind of, but the wing has a little bit of a rock to it when you roll it, and this one just rolled right around. It was pretty linear. But I flew it for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then I pulled the power to idle and glided it around just to kind of get the low speed characteristics. I did get it a little slow, but a little, power, and it punched right out of there. And so anyway, I tried a couple of, kind of passes just to kind of get the landing figured out and how it was gliding to the ground. And after, 3 minutes or so, came in. The grass was there. I just kind of flared, and it just flew right on the grass. The little wheel, spun, and it caught a wingtip and just kind of spun around. So It landed very, very easily. I was really surprised. I expected it to I thought for sure I was going to kind of skip it because I was trying to stay a little fast. But it did slow down enough to get it on the ground, and it did flare. And so when we originally saw these, we were talking to Eric. Jay mentioned that Eric lives in El Paso, and he's like, dude, when you land, this is like 80 grit sandpaper out here in Arizona, and in Texas it's very similar. So he said, how do you keep this thing from just, screaming, just grinding up the 3D printing? And of course, Eric, being the funny guy he is, says, well, I designed these high profile titanium, stops that are attached to the end of the wings. And so Jay and I were like, no kidding, and so we're looking at him and everything, and he's standing there shaking his head. And Jay's got a picture on his. Well, come to find out, it's a thumbtack, right? There it is. It's just a little thumbtack that he stuck into the 3D printing that keeps it from scratching. And after he gave us, after we were talking about this whole titanium, where did he find it? How did he get it made? Did he mill it out? He let the cat out of the bag and just basically said, you can buy them for a bag of 100 of them at Walmart and just replace them if they get too ground down. So that was a pretty funny trick that he played on us, and we were for $1, yeah. So anyway, I didn't really need them on the grass, but I will tell you that the thumbtacks did slow me down because the grass kind of wrapped around them and wrapped around a couple of the thumbtacks, and so I did have to pull grass out of the thumbtacks. But surprisingly enough, the airplane flew great. I did figure out why the hatch does not sit perfectly level.
I can already figure out why.
And that part of that. Okay, why don't you tell us why?
Well, it kind of hit me when you were like, man, it was flying like a bat out of hell. It was like a homesick angel. It was not to say that the plane doesn't fly fast, but I just remembered that was for your high speed glider, so it was flying on a 4-cell, and I remember distinctly.
That's correct.
That Eric had designed this plane for a 3-cell. So, yeah, not only was it overpropped, had an extra cell to it. You were almost. I'm surprised you didn't do a smoke test, or like that one plane back when we were doing the foamies, when you put a 3-cell in a little 2-cell.
The 3,000
with a huge prop, and you were like, "Hey, man, look at this thing go! Hey, what's that smoke for? Oops, nothing's working."
Yeah, that was a 3,000. Yeah, exactly. That was a 3,000 milliamp little Wonder motor, and I put a 12-inch prop on it, so it lasted all of about 12 seconds.
Yep.
But it climbed
climbed 12 seconds. You were up in the stratosphere.
It was amazing. So yes, I was in the stratosphere, and then I was able to fly it for a minute or two, gliding it back to the earth because I had no motor. You are correct. This is a 4-cell, this Tattoo Battery 1050. In my head, I was like, oh, I don't have to buy any more batteries because I already have the 4-cell. I already have the 1050, right? And it's going to fit perfect. Well, I didn't realize it has an extra cell in there. So anyway, then I'm kind of like bummed out because I'm like, oh, man, I hope I didn't destroy the electronics on it. Well, I checked them all. They worked fine. I never really went over half throttle because it was, I really had no reason to. The park is not as big. So looking back, I'm glad I did not maidened it at Sun Valley Flyers. Because had I done that, I would have been tempted to go full throttle. Because there's room.
Gotcha.
There's plenty of room out there, right? And so coming down, I would have done a low pass at really high speed and probably at that point burned the motor up. But because we're at the park, I was limiting my speed, right? Because the park is not as big as Sun Valley Flyers. It's fairly small when it comes to flying fast things. And we were standing kind of in that area. And so I was just making this little, rectangular box pattern in right above the tree line, and so I didn't really crank it. Now downwind I did give it a little bit of boost there, but I was flying plenty fast for the park area, and I was on the maiden flight. I didn't really push it as hard as I probably could. So, needless to say, Eric, I know you're a listener. It did run very well on a 4-cell. I don't really think that I damaged anything, too badly. If it didn't really over amp it or any of that stuff, because I pretty much stayed below half throttle. I didn't really need to go any more than that. But it flew fantastic. As a matter of fact, it flew, in my eyes, it almost flew better than the one that I got to fly at the Electric Festival. And I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's just because this is mine, It's a mine. But
that could be part of it.
And maybe because, Eric had flown his and it had, it had some bumps and bruises just from, flying it around. And this one is brand spanking new. So there's no drag, no cuts, no, anything on it. So when I did fly it again, so we got 2 flights out of it. This time I was very cognizant of having a 4-cell. So I definitely never went above half throttle. I babied that thing all the way around, but it still flew just perfectly fast. So it was incredibly fun. It's a great airplane. However, it's not one that I can just throw in the car and keep in the car as I drive around Phoenix, because it is made out of 3D printed. And it's 115 outside right now, and I think if I waited any longer than about 10 minutes, it would be just a big blob of colored PLA. So, what can I say?
Yeah. Well, hey,
so when I did get home, I did. What's that?
Oh no! What I was going to say was a couple of things. A, you probably weren't going to damage the motor because the electronic speed controller probably would have cut out if it got too warm or too hot. But the problem was not so much damaging the motor or the ESC. It would have been if the motor got hot. It's attached to a PLA firewall, and you could have melted or deformed the firewall. Right. So it would have been, here it is perfectly straight. The motor gets hot. It's getting pulled on, and it actually would deform the firewall to pull out, and then you go back to half throttle. It cools off, and now your thrust angle's all out of whack, and you're like, man, this thing flies all weird and wonky. What's going wrong? What's up with it? So that could have been one of the dangers if you would have got that motor hot and it got transferred to the firewall, the plastic firewall. So lucky.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I was pretty lucky. I know we're out of time, and we'll continue our conversation in 2 weeks. But before we go here, I did wind up going online and buying some 1,000 milliamp 3-cells. So I now own a Turnigy Bolt. It's a high voltage LiPo battery, 11.4 volts, and then I have another Turnigy Nanotech 1,000 milliamp. There you go. You can see both of those. I'm excited about trying the Bolt because I've read some really good reviews, and it's supposed to be a high voltage and supposed to give kind of a really good take on it. We are out of time, but we are going to continue our conversation. I know Jay has some questions, so join us 2 weeks from today as we continue this conversation, and let us know what questions you have about the Infinity Wing, or go to 3daeroventures.com and download the plans. So anyway, Michael from Arizona.
And from the hills of Texas, I'm Jay.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.